the first 5 angles, you can be proficient in self-defense on the street.
And I don't think it was luck, and I don't believe it was all me. I believe I was very, very fortunate to have the right people in my corner at the right time when I really, really needed them the most.
Hi, I'm GM Darren Tibon from Stockton, California, Angels Disciples of Eskrima Association. My first teacher was my father, Gene Tibon Sr. Everybody my dad had trained with, I had trained with too. Goju-ryu was my first art, and my dad trained under Sensei Rodney Hu. Me and my brother later on ended up training from Rodney Hu. My dad trained from late Grandmaster Angel Cabales. That's who my teacher ended up being for Serrata Eskrima. My father, Gene Tibon Sr., he also trained Kabbalah Serrata as well as boxing. My dad was an amateur fighter back in the mid-50s, 1950s, but he was diagnosed with tuberculosis, and that pretty much ended his fight career. But he stayed active in Goju-ryu, and in late 60s, mid 70s, he trained with the late Grandmaster Angel Cabales. As a little kid, my dad made sure we all train one form of a martial arts of what experiences he had. Goju-ryu, boxing, and Serrata Eskrima. My dad never finished all the 12 angles of Kabbalah Serrata. He got up to angle 8. But as a young kid, he trained me up to angle number 5. And that was pretty much all the Serrata Eskrima I ever trained from my father was up to angle 5. But my dad also explained to me, and later on I've heard that if you learn the first 5 angles, you can be proficient in self-defense on the street. So my dad felt that angle number 5 was sufficient enough for me. But in studying Goju-ryu to about the age of 19 to 20 years old, I trained with my brother. And then from about that time, I took on Serrata Eskrima as my primary art. And I pretty much stayed with Kabbalah Serrata till my life now. As a very young teenager, it was very important for my father that though both of his sons were training in karate, and my dad was training me boxing, and the Serrata Eskrima he did share with me, my dad asked that one of us follow traditional Filipino martial arts because of my family background, and that my great-grandfather Marcos Tibon was a escrimador. So I chose Filipino martial arts to hold on to my culture. And it was my dad's wishes that me or my brother Eugene, that one of us followed up Filipino martial arts. I think what made it very easy for me to follow up in Filipino martial arts with the late Grandmaster Angel Cabales. First of all, my dad, my uncles, some of my cousins, they all had one time or another trained with the late Grandmaster Angel Cabales. Outside of that, I had cousins that lived by Angel. So when I was a young kid, about 12, 13, and I used to stay the weekend at their home, I had met one of Angel's sons, Johnny Cabales. And in knowing the family and later on working with Vincent Cabales when I was about 18 years old. I first met him, and making friends with the sons of the late Grandmaster Angel Cabales, it gave me even further want to train Kabbalah Serrata. The first time I met Angel personally, I believe I was 14 years old. I was asked to be a godfather to my nephew, Jerry Arrington. But anyway, it's traditional that several godfathers are asked to baptize a child. And I was chosen as one of these godfathers, but also late Grandmaster Angel Cabales was one of the selected godfathers too. So at a young teenager, you know, at the baptism in the church, I was standing, you know, by late Grandmaster Angel Cabales. And he came to the party afterward, was carrying my nephew around. He was a baby. And that's one of the first times I really met Angel, outside of watching him at Barrio Fiesta as a young child growing up doing demonstrations throughout Stockton, California.
Hi, my name is Danny Lopez, and I began my martial arts training when I was 13. I'm 59 now, so that means I've got 46 years of experience in the martial arts. There's an old saying that goes that it takes a village to raise a child, and in my case, I believe that that is very true. There's often people that say that, you know, you're lucky in life, and I don't think it was luck, and I don't believe it was all me. I believe I was very, very fortunate to have the right people in my corner at the right time when I really, really needed them the most. When I started my martial arts training, I started with Anthony Blas, who was my premier instructor, and then Ben Tilaguana was our master. We didn't study in traditional karate studios per se. We used to train inside of garages, and a lot could be said for that style of training. If you got a black belt, you fought like a black belt. The whole point of taking martial arts is to be able to defend yourself. And if you're walking around with a black belt and any guy off the street can really take you out, then that black belt really doesn't mean a whole lot. And that was one of the things that very thankful that we didn't just get our black belts. We had to fight to that level. When I think I was about 15, maybe 16, 15 years old, I started competing in kata. I started competing in 1970, the tail end of 73, early start in 74. I started training, actually competing in the men's black belt division in kata. And I began to win in a lot of tournaments. I was getting a lot of trophies for my competition. The guys that I used to read a lot about in Kung Fu magazines that were really, really good in Kung Fu and in katas was Eric Lee. And Eric Lee had already retired from competition. And I had met Eric Lee, I believe it was 1974, when I met Eric Lee for the very first time. And I remember wanting to get to that level that he was at. I wanted to be the best in kata competition. And there were two gentlemen that were really sweeping every tournament that they took, and that was Albert Leong and James Liu. Now, when I came on the scene and started competing in the men's black belt division, Albert Leon and James Liu had just retired. And I felt like, man, you know, there's nobody left for me to compete against in the soft style division. And they were both students of Douglas Wong, who was, he produced some of the greatest kata competitors of that era, or any era. To learn from Douglas Wong was was something special because the guys that came out of his training camp really excelled in forms. And but when James Liu and Albert Leong retired, the next two that came up was Robin Kane and a young man named James, I think his name is James Brown, Jimmy Brown. Those were the two to beat. And in Mike Stone's Four Seasons tournament in Las Vegas in 1974, I had the opportunity to compete against Robin Kane in that tournament. And I remember tying for first place with him. And I thought, wow, I finally made it as a soft-styled competitor. And it was at that point that right after that tournament, I turned my attention to fighting. Now, the style of Kung Fu really didn't lend itself to point tournament fighting, so I had to learn other ways of fighting, or just shift certain things that I was doing differently in order to be competitive or to win in the tournament circuit.